The small town of Maplewood was alive with excitement as the sun rose on a crisp autumn morning. The trees lining the streets were painted in shades of gold and crimson, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. It was a special day for Clara Harper, who was about to celebrate her 80th birthday. Her family had spent weeks planning the perfect celebration, a cozy gathering at her home filled with laughter, love, and plenty of food. The house buzzed with activity as relatives arrived one by one, each bringing something unique to contribute to the festivities. Clara's youngest grandson, Ethan, was particularly eager to make this day unforgettable. At just 9 years old, he took his role in the celebration very seriously. That morning, Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his room, carefully adjusting his tiny suit jacket and straightening his clip-on tie. He had picked out the outfit himself, determined to look gentlemanly for his grandma. His mother watched from the doorway, smiling at his enthusiasm. She couldn't help but laugh when Ethan practiced bowing dramatically, as though he were greeting royalty. "Ethan, you're going to knock Grandma's socks off," she teased, ruffling his neatly combed hair. "I'm not joking, Mom," Ethan replied earnestly, smoothing his hair back into place. "This is Grandma's big day. I have to be ready." While Ethan prepared, the rest of the family worked together to transform Clara's living room into a cheerful party space. Balloons floated near the ceiling, tied to chairs with colorful ribbons. Streamers hung across the walls, creating a festive atmosphere that matched the warmth of the occasion. On the dining table sat the centerpiece of the celebration, a beautifully decorated cake. Its layers were frosted with creamy vanilla icing, and the words, "Happy 80th Grandma," were written in bold blue letters. A single candle shaped like the number 80 stood proudly in the center, waiting to be lit. As the preparations continued, Clara herself moved around the house with quiet grace. Dressed in a floral dress and wearing her favorite pearl necklace, she greeted each guest with a warm hug and kind words. Though she tried to act calm, there was an unmistakable sparkle in her eyes, a mix of joy and nostalgia. 80 years was a long time, and today felt like a milestone worth savoring. When everything was finally set up, the family gathered in the living room. Ethan stood close to Clara, fidgeting slightly with the piece of paper he'd been clutching all morning. Earlier, he had scribbled some notes on it, practicing what he wanted to say during the celebration. He didn't want to forget a single word. As the adults chatted and laughed, Ethan found himself observing them more closely than usual. There was something different about the way they interacted today, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Uncle Greg, for instance, seemed unusually distant. He avoided eye contact with Aunt Lisa, choosing instead to focus on rearranging the napkins on the snack table. Cousin Sarah kept glancing at her phone, whispering nervously into it whenever she thought no one was looking. Even Grandpa Joe, usually so talkative, appeared lost in thought as he flipped through an old photo album. Ethan tilted his head curiously, wondering why everyone seemed so preoccupied. Despite the underlying tension, the mood remained lighthearted. The smell of freshly baked cookies wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of distant thunder as clouds began to gather outside. No one paid much attention to the weather. They were too busy enjoying each other's company. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, the entire family surrounded Clara, their voices blending together in a heartfelt melody. Ethan stood right beside her, clutching his paper tightly, his heart pounding with anticipation. Little did anyone know, this seemingly ordinary birthday celebration was about to take an extraordinary turn. Ethan's innocent observations and carefully prepared speech would soon reveal truths that had been buried for decades. For now, though, the family basked in the moment, unaware of the storm, both literal and emotional, that was about to unfold. As the family settled into the cozy living room, the atmosphere was filled with a mix of laughter and quiet murmurs. Plates of food were passed around, and the aroma of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and freshly baked bread lingered in the air. The dining table, adorned with colorful napkins and sparkling silverware, stood as a centerpiece of warmth and togetherness. Yet, despite the outward cheerfulness, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ethan had always been observant, perhaps more so than most children his age. While others focused on their plates or chatted animatedly, he quietly took note of the little things. The way Uncle Greg avoided sitting next to Aunt Lisa, how Cousin Sarah kept glancing at her phone under the table, and the way Grandpa Joe seemed lost in thought as he flipped through an old photo album. Ethan's sharp eyes caught these subtle cues, even if he didn't fully understand them yet. Uncle Greg, usually the life of the party, was unusually quiet today. He sat at the far end of the couch, fidgeting with a coaster and avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially Aunt Lisa. Whenever she spoke, he would nod politely but quickly redirect his attention elsewhere. It was almost as if they were deliberately avoiding each other. Ethan noticed this and tilted his head slightly, wondering why two people who normally joked around now seemed so distant. Cousin Sarah, on the other hand, appeared distracted. She was scrolling through her phone, typing hurried messages and biting her lip nervously. Every few minutes she'd glance up to see if anyone was watching her, then quickly return to her screen. Ethan wondered what could be so important that she couldn't put her phone down, even on Grandma Clara's special day. He leaned closer to her once, trying to catch a glimpse of the screen, but she turned it away just in time. Grandpa Joe, sitting by the window with the photo album open on his lap, seemed miles away. His fingers traced the edges of faded photographs, his expression soft and wistful. Occasionally he'd chuckle softly to himself or sigh deeply, as though the memories were both sweet and bittersweet. Ethan wanted to ask him about the pictures, but something held him back. There was a heaviness in Grandpa Joe's gaze that made Ethan hesitate. Meanwhile, Clara herself moved gracefully among the guests, offering hugs and kind words. She laughed along with the jokes, complimented the food, and thanked everyone for coming. But even she wasn't immune to the undercurrent of tension. Ethan watched as she paused briefly after speaking to certain relatives, her smile faltering for just a moment before returning brighter than before. It was as if she were holding something inside, carrying a weight no one else could see. Amidst all these observations, Ethan felt a growing curiosity. He had always known his family to be loving and close-knit, but today, cracks seemed to be showing beneath the surface. Was it because of the storm brewing outside? Or was there something deeper going on? He didn't have answers, but the questions swirled in his mind like leaves caught in a gust of wind. The conversation eventually shifted to lighter topics, with stories of past birthdays and funny childhood memories being shared. Ethan listened intently, soaking up every word. When someone mentioned a particularly hilarious incident involving a runaway piñata at a cousin's birthday years ago, the entire room erupted in laughter. Even Ethan giggled, momentarily forgetting his earlier concerns. But as dessert time approached, the tension returned. Everyone gathered around the dining table where the beautifully decorated cake awaited. Its creamy frosting gleamed under the soft glow of the overhead light, and the blue lettering stood out proudly against the white background. Clara took her seat at the head of the table, surrounded by her loved ones. As the candles were lit, the room fell silent except for the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. Ethan stood beside Clara, clutching the folded piece of paper he'd been working on all morning. His heart raced as he prepared to speak. He had written down his thoughts carefully, wanting to make sure he said everything just right. But as he looked around the room, taking in the faces of his family members, he realized there was more to this moment than he had anticipated. Something about the way everyone was acting, the unspoken words, the forced smiles, made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a secret too big for him to ignore. Before the singing began, Ethan glanced at Clara. Her eyes sparkled with happiness, but there was also a hint of something else, a quiet sadness perhaps, or maybe resignation. Whatever it was, it tugged at Ethan's heartstrings. He knew then that his speech wouldn't just be about celebrating Grandma's birthday. It might uncover truths that had long been hidden. As the first notes of Happy Birthday filled the air, Ethan took a deep breath. He was ready, or as ready as he could be. Little did he know his words would set off a chain reaction that would change the course of the evening forever. For now, though, the family sang together, united, in celebration, unaware of the storm that was about to break not only outside but within their own hearts. The final notes of Happy Birthday faded into the warm, candle-lit room, leaving behind a brief silence that hung in the air like a suspended breath. Everyone's attention turned to Clara, who sat smiling at the head of the table, her eyes twinkling with joy as she prepared to blow out the candles. But before she could lean forward, Ethan cleared his throat loudly, drawing all eyes toward him. "I have something to say," he announced, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. For a moment, the room froze. Adults exchanged amused glances, some chuckling softly at the sight of the 9-year-old standing there with a crumpled piece of paper clutched tightly in his hands. Clara's smile widened as she gestured for him to continue. "Well, go ahead, sweetheart," she encouraged gently, her tone filled with pride. "What do you want to tell us?" Ethan straightened his tiny suit jacket and adjusted his clip-on tie as if preparing for a grand performance. He unfolded the paper, smoothing it out carefully on the edge of the table. Then, taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "Grandma," he started, his voice clear and confident, "you're the best grandma anyone could ever ask for. You always make cookies when we visit, and you let me help stir the batter even though I spill flour everywhere." A few relatives chuckled, nodding in agreement. Clara laughed softly, her cheeks flushing with pride. "You remember all our birthdays and you send cards with funny jokes inside," Ethan continued, glancing up from his paper to meet her gaze. "And whenever I'm sad, you know exactly what to say to make me feel better. So today I wanted to say thank you for being so kind, for loving us no matter what, and for making every day special." By now the room had grown completely silent. Even Cousin Sarah had set her phone aside, listening intently. Ethan's words carried an unexpected sincerity, touching the hearts of everyone present. Clara dabbed at the corner of her eye with a napkin, visibly moved. But Ethan paused, lowering his paper slightly. His expression shifted from cheerful to thoughtful, his brow furrowing as if he were weighing his next words carefully. The pause stretched just long enough to make the adults exchange curious glances. What was coming next? "I also want to say—" Ethan hesitated again, looking around the room. His wide eyes scanned the faces of his family members, Uncle Greg, who had been nervously tapping his foot, Aunt Lisa, whose lips pressed into a thin line, Grandpa Joe, whose hand rested protectively on the old photo album. Something about their reaction seemed to give Ethan courage. He took another deep breath and spoke firmly. "Families aren't perfect," he declared, his voice ringing out boldly. "Sometimes people fight or they don't talk to each other the way they should. Sometimes they keep secrets, even big ones, and that's okay because nobody's perfect." He paused, letting his words sink in. The tension in the room thickened, almost palpable now. No one dared to interrupt him. Then, turning directly to Clara, Ethan added softly, "But Grandma, did you ever keep secrets from us too?" The question hit like a thunderclap. For a split second, the entire room went still. Clara's smile faltered, her lips parting slightly as if she were about to respond, but no sound came out. Her hand instinctively reached for Ethan's, gripping it tightly. The warmth of her touch contrasted sharply with the icy silence that had fallen over the gathering. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Uncle Greg coughed awkwardly, breaking the stillness. Aunt Lisa glanced sharply at Ethan, her expression unreadable. Cousin Sarah leaned forward, her earlier distraction forgotten as she stared at the boy with wide eyes. Even Grandpa Joe closed the photo album slowly, his weathered hands trembling faintly. Clara finally found her voice, though it was softer than usual. "Oh, Ethan," she said, forcing a light laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You've been thinking hard about this, haven't you? Secrets are tricky things. Sometimes people keep them because they think it's for the best. At least that's what they believe at the time." Her response only deepened the unease. Ethan tilted, his head studying her face intently. There was something in her tone, a flicker of sadness perhaps, or regret, that made him wonder if he'd stumbled onto something far bigger than he'd imagined. Before anyone could say anything more, Clara leaned forward to blow out the candles. As she exhaled, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a shiver through the room. The lights flickered dramatically, casting eerie shadows across the walls. In that brief moment of darkness, the knife slipped from Clara's grasp, clattering against the plate and slicing through the frosting. When the light steadied, gasps erupted around the table. Beneath the ruined cake lay a hidden compartment, its contents exposed for all to see, a small yellowed envelope addressed simply to my family. The room erupted into chaos. Questions flew back and forth. Who put it there? Why was it hidden in the cake? What could it possibly contain? Everyone scrambled to make sense of the discovery, their voices overlapping in confusion. Clara stared at the envelope, her face pale and stricken. It was as though the weight of decades had come crashing down in an instant. Amidst the commotion, Ethan stood quietly, watching everything unfold with a calmness that belied his age. He hadn't meant to cause such a stir, but he couldn't deny the feeling in his gut that somehow he'd uncovered something important, something that needed to be said. As Clara hesitantly reached for the envelope, the room fell silent once. Again, every pair of eyes fixed on her trembling hands. Whatever was inside would change everything, and Ethan, standing beside her, knew that his innocent question had opened a door that could never be closed again. The room was eerily silent as Clara Harper picked up the yellowed envelope from the remains of the shattered cake. Her hands trembled slightly, and her face had gone pale, making her look older than her 80 years. The envelope felt fragile. In her grasp, its edges worn and creased as though it had been folded and refolded many times over the decades. For a moment, she simply stared at it, her mind racing with thoughts no one else could see. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone, turning the once cheerful birthday celebration into something heavy and uncertain. Ethan stood beside her, his earlier confidence replaced by wide-eyed curiosity. He watched his grandmother closely, sensing that whatever was inside that envelope carried deep significance. Around the table, the family exchanged uneasy glances. Uncle Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Aunt Lisa leaned forward, her lips pressed tightly together. Cousin Sarah's phone lay forgotten on the table, her attention fully fixed on Clara. Even Grandpa Joe, who rarely showed much emotion beyond gentle smiles, looked tense, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the photo album. Clara finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. I didn't know this was here," she said, addressing the room. Her words were met with skeptical murmurs. How could she not have known? After all, it was her birthday cake. But before anyone could press her further, she carefully opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of paper. It was old, its edges brittle and discolored with age. The handwriting on it was shaky yet deliberate, unmistakably Clara's own. She took a deep breath, holding the letter closer so she could read it. As her eyes scanned the lines, her expression changed, first to shock, then to sorrow, and finally to resignation. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined to keep her composure. When she began speaking, her voice wavered, each word carrying the weight of years unspoken. "This," she paused, swallowing hard. "This is a letter I wrote a very long time ago. Decades ago, actually. I never intended for anyone to find it, or at least not like this." She glanced briefly at Ethan, her gaze filled with both gratitude and regret. "It's about something I've kept hidden for most of my life." Her confession sent ripples through the room. Some relatives sat frozen, their faces etched with confusion, while others leaned in, desperate to hear more. Clara hesitated, clutching the letter tightly as if it might slip away. Finally, she continued. "Before I met your grandfather," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I had another child, a daughter. Her name was Emily." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. Clara raised a hand to quiet them, though her own emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "I was young then, just a teenager, and I wasn't ready to be a mother. My parents pressured me to give her up for adoption. I fought against it, but back then, I didn't have much choice." Tears streamed down her face now, unchecked and raw. Ethan reached out instinctively, placing a small hand on hers. She squeezed it gently, drawing strength from his presence. I loved her so much, Clara continued, her voice breaking. But I believed it was the best thing for her, to give her a chance at a better life with a family who could provide everything I couldn't. After that, I tried to move on. I married your grandfather, started our family, and built a life here in Maplewood. But losing Emily, it left a hole in my heart that never fully healed. The revelation stunned the room into silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sounds were the faint rustling of leaves outside and the occasional sniffle from Clara as she wiped her tears. The family members sat frozen, processing the bombshell they had just heard. For many of them, it was impossible to reconcile this secret with the woman they thought they knew, the loving grandmother, the pillar of their family. Uncle Greg was the first to break the silence. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, his tone sharp with frustration. "We're your family, Mom. We deserve to know." Clara sighed deeply, her shoulders sagging under the weight of guilt and regret. "I wanted to protect you," she admitted. "I thought keeping it a secret would spare you the pain I felt, and after so many years passed, it seemed easier to let it stay buried. But I see now how wrong I was." Aunt Lisa shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Do you have any idea what this means? That there's someone out there, a sister, an aunt, who's part of our family and we didn't even know?" Grandpa, Joe, usually so calm and composed, looked stricken. He placed a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder, his own eyes glistening. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked softly, his voice tinged with hurt. "All these years and I never knew." Clara turned to him, her expression pained. "I wanted to, Joe. So many times I almost did. But I was afraid. Afraid of how you'd react. Afraid of ruining the life we built together. I convinced myself it was better to leave the past where it belonged." As the adults grappled with the truth, Ethan remained quiet, observing everything with a maturity beyond his years. He understood, perhaps better than anyone else, why secrets could weigh so heavily on a person, yet he also sensed that this moment, painful as it was, could bring the family closer if they chose to face it together. Slowly, the initial wave of shock began to subside, replaced by a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and even compassion. Cousin Sarah, who had been unusually distracted earlier, surprised everyone by speaking up. "Maybe this isn't just about blame," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Maybe it's about understanding. Grandma made a choice a long time ago because she thought it was the right thing to do. And yeah, it hurts to find out like this, but maybe we can use this as a chance to heal." Her words hung in the air, offering a sliver of hope amidst the chaos. Clara looked at her granddaughter, gratitude shining in her tear-filled eyes. "Thank you, Sarah," she whispered. Then, addressing the entire family, she added, "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. What I did was selfish, and I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. But I hope we can work through this, together, as a family." For a few moments, no one responded. The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance. Inside, however, the atmosphere began to shift. One by one, the family members nodded, their expressions softening. They weren't ready to forget or forgive completely, but they recognized the importance of moving forward. And as Ethan hugged his grandmother tightly, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay, a sense of unity slowly returned to the room. The secret that had lain dormant for decades had finally come to light, and though it shattered the illusion of perfection, it also opened the door to healing. In the days that followed Clara's startling revelation, the Harper family found itself navigating uncharted waters. The cozy warmth of their small-town home, once filled with laughter and simple joys, now carried a heaviness that lingered like storm clouds reluctant to disperse. Conversations were strained, emotions raw, and trust shaken. Yet amidst the turmoil, there was an undeniable undercurrent of determination, a shared desire to confront the past, rather than let it tear them apart. Clara, burdened by guilt but resolute in her decision to make amends, spent hours alone in her bedroom poring over old photographs and mementos. She sifted through faded letters, baby clothes she had tucked away decades ago, and newspaper clippings about adoption agencies. Each item brought back memories she had tried so hard to bury, memories of holding her newborn daughter for the first time, of signing papers that would sever their bond, and of walking away from the hospital with empty arms. It was painful, yes, but also cathartic. For years she had carried this secret alone. Now she felt compelled to share it, to bring Emily back into the light, even if only symbolically. Ethan, who had unknowingly sparked the unraveling of the family's hidden truth, became the unexpected bridge between his grandmother and the rest of the family. While the adults wrestled with anger, hurt, and confusion, Ethan approached the situation with a clarity that belied his age. He understood that secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, often festered beneath the surface, poisoning relationships over time. And though he couldn't fully grasp the complexity of what had happened all those years ago, he knew one thing for certain. Families weren't perfect, but they could still love each other deeply. One evening, as the rain continued to patter against the windows, Ethan sat cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by relatives. They had gathered not for another meal or celebration, but for a difficult conversation, one they all knew needed to happen. The air was tense, punctuated by occasional sighs and nervous glances. Clara sat at the center of the group, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for signs of forgiveness, or at least understanding. "Grandma," Ethan began, breaking the silence, "you said you wanted to find Emily, right?" His voice was soft but steady, drawing everyone's attention. Clara nodded slowly, her throat tightening as she fought back tears. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied. "I owe it to her, and to all of you, to try." Uncle Greg, who had been unusually quiet since the birthday party, leaned forward, his expression conflicted. "How do we even start looking for someone who's been gone for so long?" he asked, his tone tinged with frustration. "It's not like we have much to go on. We might not need as much as you think," Grandpa Joe interjected, surprising everyone. He had spent the past few days researching adoption records and legal processes, determined to help Clara however he could. "There are organizations that specialize in reuniting birth parents with their children. If Emily wants to be found, we can reach out to her." The mention of Emily wanting to be found struck a chord with Aunt Lisa, whose earlier anger had softened into sadness. "Do you really think she'd want to meet us after all these years?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if she doesn't? What if she hates us? Or worse, blames us for letting Mom give her up?" Clara reached out, placing a gentle hand on Lisa's arm. "That's a risk I'm willing to take," she said firmly. "If there's even a chance she's curious about where she came from, I owe it to her to try. But if she doesn't want anything to do with us, well, that's her choice, and we'll have to respect it." Her words resonated deeply with the family. Though none of them had experienced what Clara had gone through, they recognized the courage it took for her to face the consequences of her actions. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to rally around her, not because they had forgotten the pain she caused, but because they realized healing required effort from everyone involved. Over the next several weeks, the Harpers worked together to track down any leads they could find. They contacted adoption registries, scoured public records, and reached out to social workers who specialized in reunions. It was a painstaking process, fraught with dead ends and false hopes. But each step brought them closer to closure. Ethan played a key role too, using his boundless curiosity and sharp memory to piece together fragments of stories Clara had told him over the years. Together, they created a timeline of Emily's early life, hoping it would lead them to her current whereabouts. Meanwhile, the family dynamics began to shift in subtle yet meaningful ways. Uncle Greg, who had initially lashed out in anger, started spending more time with Clara, helping her sort through old documents and offering quiet support. Aunt Lisa, though still processing her feelings, made an effort to include Clara in conversations she had previously avoided. Even Cousin Sarah, who had always seemed distant, surprised everyone by organizing a video call with extended family members to gather additional information about Emily's adoption. Through it all, Ethan remained the glue holding everything together. Whether it was reminding his cousins to check online databases or encouraging his uncles to stay patient during frustrating setbacks, he approached the search with unwavering optimism. "We're doing this for Grandma," he reminded them whenever tensions ran high. "And for Emily. Families stick together, no matter what." Finally, after months of tireless effort, a breakthrough came. An adoption agency confirmed that Emily, now in her late 50s, had registered with a mutual consent reunion service years earlier. When Clara received the news, she broke down in tears of relief, gratitude, and overwhelming emotion. With her family by her side, she penned a heartfelt letter to Emily, explaining who she was and why she wanted to reconnect. The letter ended with a simple plea: "If you're open to meeting me, I'd love nothing more than to get to know you again." The wait for Emily's response was agonizing. Days turned into weeks, and just when hope began to wane, a reply arrived. Emily, living in a neighboring state, expressed cautious interest in meeting Clara. She admitted she had always wondered about her birth mother but had never dared to imagine such a reunion possible. Plans were quickly set in motion for a tentative meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between their homes. As the day of the meeting approached, nerves ran high among the Harper family. Would Emily forgive Clara? Would she embrace the rest of the family, or would she keep them at arm's length? Despite the uncertainty, they rallied around Clara, ensuring she felt supported every step of the way. Ethan, true to form, offered the most comforting words of all. "No matter what happens, Grandma, you've already done something amazing. You faced your fears and chose honesty. That's what families are supposed to do." On the morning of the meeting, Clara dressed carefully, choosing a floral dress similar to the one she had worn on her 80th birthday. As she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her pearl necklace, Ethan appeared beside her, holding her hand. "You look beautiful, Grandma," he said with a smile. "And you're going to be okay." With those words echoing in her mind, Clara stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Though the journey promised challenges, she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't alone. Her family, imperfect, flawed, and deeply human, was standing beside her, united by love and a newfound commitment to honesty. The cafe where Clara and Emily were set to meet was nestled on the corner of a quiet street, its windows adorned with potted plants and warm lighting. It was the kind of place that invited calm conversations. Soft music played in the background, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of baked goods. Clara arrived early, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. Ethan sat beside her, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions swirling within her. "You don't have to be scared, Grandma," Ethan whispered, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "This is about love, not fear." Clara smiled, faintly, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. She nodded, taking a deep breath as she scanned the entrance for any sign of Emily. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. Then finally the door opened and a woman walked in, a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Clara herself. Her hair was streaked with silver, but her features mirrored Clara's youthful photographs. The same high cheekbones, the same gentle curve of her lips. Time seemed to stand still as their eyes met across the room. Emily hesitated for a moment, her gaze softening as she took in the sight of the elderly woman sitting at the table. Slowly, almost tentatively, she approached. "Are you Clara?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara stood up, tears already streaming down her face. "Yes," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "And you must be Emily." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, years of separation dissolving into this single, fragile connection. Then, without warning, Emily stepped forward and embraced Clara tightly. The hug lasted longer than either of them expected, a silent acknowledgement of the decades they had missed. When they finally pulled apart, both women were crying openly, their faces flushed with a mix of joy and sorrow. "I can't believe this is real," Emily said, her voice trembling as she wiped her tears. "I've thought about you so many times over the years, wondered what you looked like, how your life turned out. And I've thought about you every day," Clara admitted, reaching out to hold Emily's hands. "I'm so sorry for giving you up. I didn't want to. I promise you that. But I believed it was the best thing for you at the time." Emily nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I understand," she said after a pause. "It couldn't have been easy for you. And honestly, I had a good life with my adoptive family. They loved me deeply, and I'll always be grateful for that. But there was always a part of me that felt incomplete, like I was missing something or someone." Her words brought fresh tears to Clara's eyes. "You're not missing anymore," Clara said softly. "You have a whole family waiting to meet you. Imperfect as we are, we're yours now if you'll have us." Emily glanced at Ethan, who had been quietly observing everything from his seat. He smiled shyly, offering a small wave. "Hi," he said simply. "I'm Ethan, your nephew." A laugh bubbled out of Emily despite her tears. "Well, aren't you just the cutest thing?" she teased, kneeling down to ruffle his hair. "Looks like I've got some catching up to do with all of you." Over the next hour, the three of them talked, haltingly at first, then with growing ease. Emily shared stories about her childhood, her career as a teacher, and her own children, now grown and starting families of their own. Clara listened intently, marveling at the life her daughter had built. In turn, Clara recounted tales of raising her sons, her marriage to Grandpa Joe, and the countless memories she cherished with her grandchildren. By the end of their conversation, the initial awkwardness had melted away, replaced by a sense of tentative belonging. Emily agreed to visit Maplewood soon, eager to meet the rest of the Harper family. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Clara handed her a carefully wrapped gift, a photo album filled with pictures of Emily's birth family, along with letters written by each relative expressing their hopes for the future. "This isn't goodbye," Clara said firmly as they hugged once more. "It's just the beginning." Back home in Maplewood, the Harpers eagerly awaited news of the meeting. When Clara called later that evening, her voice brimming with happiness, the entire household erupted in cheers. Plans were made for Emily's upcoming visit, and everyone pitched in to prepare. Uncle Greg volunteered to repaint the guest bedroom. Aunt Lisa baked dozens of cookies. Cousin Sarah created a slideshow of family photos to share during Emily's stay. Even Grandpa Joe joined in, dusting off old board games to ensure there would be plenty of laughter during their time together. When Emily finally arrived, the reunion was emotional but joyful. She was greeted with open arms and warm smiles, instantly embraced as part of the family. Over the course of her visit, bonds began to form, not just between Emily and Clara, but among the entire extended family. Stories were shared, secrets were aired, and forgiveness flowed freely. Though the scars of the past couldn't be erased, overnight, they became reminders of resilience rather than pain. Ethan, ever the heart of the family, captured the essence of their journey perfectly during a quiet moment one evening. Sitting cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by relatives, he looked up at Emily and said, "Families aren't perfect, but they're stronger when they tell the truth. That's what makes us special." His words resonated deeply, bringing nods of agreement from everyone present. Clara reached out to take Emily's hand, squeezing it gently. "He's right," she said with a smile. "We may not have started this way, but we're here now, and that's what matters most." As the days turned into weeks, the Harper family continued to heal and grow. Emily kept in touch regularly, visiting whenever she could and forging connections with her newfound siblings, nieces, nephews, and cousins. What had begun as a painful revelation transformed into a testament to the power of honesty, love, and second chances. And through it all, Ethan remained the quiet hero of the story. The boy who had dared to ask the hard question, igniting a chain reaction that brought his family closer than ever before.